Some of the clips featured in this video are from my senior presentation to Music 120 Composition Colloquium on April 2nd, and from the UWM Opera Scenes Productions Designer Run on March 13th. For the 2019-2020 academic year at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, I wrote an opera called Echo Ascension, Her Voice is Heard, for string quartet and 5 voices. Through Surf, I researched the hashtag #MeToo movement and wrote this opera as a discussion about it by highlighting various perspectives, responses, and experiences about recovering from trauma caused by sexual assault. In this opera, 5 women share their experiences to process their truth and to call attention to this rampant problem under the shadow of the patriarchy. As they share their stories, their words echo to others who are still searching for the power to speak, freeing them from their silence to make their own empowered choices. With access to empowered language and the support of each other, each survivor makes a step to ascend in their healing process. Their voice is heard. Hi, my name is Xai, and I am a senior in the Music Composition and Technology program at UWM, and I'm also a survivor of sexual assault. This project is deeply important to me because it took me an incredibly long time for me to find my voice as a survivor, which is an experience that I share with women across the world. Why do so many of us share this experience, and why didn't we talk about it before? Let's start with the basics. More than 1 in 3 women experience sexual violence involving physical contact during her lifetime. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before the age of 18. For every 1,000 cases of sexual assault, 995 perpetrators walk free. 63% of all cases are not even reported to the police. This widely known and accepted data speaks volumes about the state of our current society. Hashtag #MeToo has fully manifested in an age where women are sick of being victim blamed, accused of lying, or treated like our trauma is a taboo subject. But hashtag #MeToo does more than uplifting the voices of survivors who know what they went through. Hashtag #MeToo also equips victims with the language that they need to process their trauma, language they might not have had access to before. And this language helps them understand that what happened to them is not okay. This is actually my exact experience growing up. For most of my life, I couldn't understand what happened to me was not okay. I couldn't understand why it happened, or even what happened at all. It wasn't until a friend of mine in middle school, perhaps in 2008 or 2009, defined the term for me, statutory rape. It wasn't until then that I understood what happened to me was a crime. But it still took years for me to understand that I was actually a victim. This is why the sharing of this kind of language is incredibly important for all survivors. It helps us define words like consent and define what exactly sexual assault is. It can also help us understand what perpetrators look like. If none of us ever talked about this, a lot of us wouldn't even understand what happened to us and why it was wrong.
And that's the whole reason Me Too is important, is because we are using language. We are sharing stories, we're sharing experiences and perspectives in a way that I didn't have access to when I was growing up. And now teenagers are reading these things online and they're processing this as, oh, that is sexual assault.
A big part of my research involved gathering experiences and stories from women local to Milwaukee, women in my friend group, family members, but also women across the world. I found that most of the women that I spoke to had some sort of experience with sexual assault or sexual harassment, and any women I talked to that didn't have this experience definitely had experiences of rampant sexism. The part of my research that I ended up being the most excited about was finding these viral images of women really stopping to say something striking and powerful and unapologetic about hashtag #MeToo. These women taking to the internet to share their experiences and to share something that perhaps they haven't heard before, or something that hasn't been said enough.
People mean well, but I wish they'd stop telling me that my traumas made me who I am today. My resilience did that. I won't ever credit who and what tried to break me. All credit belongs to my ability to remove pieces that never should have been and finding ways to rebuild. But it made you stronger. I was a child. I didn't need to be stronger. I needed to be safe. Women are taught that they aren't allowed to be angry, that it's aggressive, ugly, always unwarranted. So we cry when we're mad and we're mocked, diminished, dismissed. There is never a safe way for women to feel rage, yet even in silence, we are blamed for saying nothing.
The images I collected were mostly from women, if not allies, and I found myself gathering all of these images because they featured empowering language that reached women all across the nation, across the world even, because you see on Twitter thousands and thousands of shares, millions of shares. You see it on Facebook and you see it on Instagram. People just hitting that share button because they agree so much with what was said in that post. And this is something I found myself doing too. And I was thinking to myself, why do I keep sharing these amazing messages from strong women? I noticed some patterns in these images, and I felt like they really clearly communicated these stories that could be formulated into characters. These experiences that I gathered from friends and family, from fellow students, across the internet, from strangers, were poured into my opera and brought to life through these new characters. One character in particular was deeply inspired by these images that I found. That character's name is Scarlet. The idea is that Scarlet is this activist character. She finds most of her empowerment and most of her healing from her trauma through protest and through taking a stance with her poetry. I tried to best illustrate this through this excerpt of my libretto, which appears as her solo in the opera. We have the right to live a life where we decide there should be no tax on life, not misled into God's plan when we're the ones who survived, twisting the truth in an attempt to twist my arms behind, an attempt to arrest my voice, but we will not divide. The assertion that everyone suffers insinuates that our pain is justified. Myths to defend this crime hide in our minds like parasites. Patriarchy, a corrupt illusion of entitlement to where my body lies, and a strange fantasy, a naive belief that in this society, my body is mine. I found it important to find language that could connect to a wide audience. I decided to take as much of a poetic approach as I could. I wanted to try to paint these experiences in a different way. The reason I really wanted to use this poetic language that could apply to multiple people at once was to really try to capture what the hashtag #MeToo really is. And that's what I really tried to achieve with my libretto, and where most of my research shows up is taking all of these individualized experiences to create one voice about this particular instance or this particular idea within Me Too. So there are 6 characters in my opera. 5 of them are vocalizing. The 6th is a silent dancer type character. So I'll explain all of them in detail. Alice is a survivor of sexual abuse, and she sees herself as sort of a truth finder. She's further along in her process of healing. She speaks about her experiences somewhat candidly and illustrates through her text that she still has hard days while trying to heal from her trauma.
Life not so simple, life not so easy. Scattered the crystals, surround me with healing. Heartbeat so fragile, my heart is so bleeding. Why can't life be simple? Why can't life be easy?
Scarlet, as I mentioned before, is an activist. She finds empowerment through calling out this injustice fiercely and unapologetically. She's definitely inspired by beat poets, particularly beat poetry about sexual assault. I was certainly thinking about Halsey's A Story Like Mine when I was writing her text and creating her character.
The assertion that everyone suffers insinuates that our pain is justified. It's to defend this crime, hide in our minds like parasites. Patriarchy, a corrupt illusion of entitlement to where my body lies.
Lily is a character who has endured domestic abuse, resembling a potted flower that is neglected, and she's still trying to make sense of her trauma.
Wandering here so easily, until I became frail, to make me both grateful and afraid.
Robin represents a character who had felt freedom in her life until she was unexpectedly sexually assaulted, referring to herself as a caged bird. She's actually directly inspired by Chanel Miller's story. Hope is a character who is far along in her healing process and connects with other women and their stories to let them know that they are not alone. She provides the other characters with an empowering mantra.
They locked me away since they were afraid to see me uncaged. They locked me away since they were afraid to see me
And then Neoma is this silent character. She responds to everybody's stories through dance. She does not use her voice. This can be interpreted as a person who is still processing their trauma. She certainly hasn't told anybody about it. She maybe is still coming to terms with it on her own. But what's most important about Neoma's character is that when you share your story, somebody is listening and you don't know how you're affecting that person. Your act of resilience and your act of bravery could be influencing somebody else to take their next step in healing or take their next step to use their voice and speak up. So musically, this opera was exhibited through mostly contemporary techniques, just to appropriately set the topic in a more modern setting. I used techniques of non-traditional notation, indeterminacy, extended string techniques, Sprechstimme, and I even set the prelude in more of a pop style, which is not very typical of opera. The goal was to communicate this topic through a modern lens in the setting of an opera, which is why I opted for mostly contemporary techniques.
There should be child,
I wanted to create a soundscape that was often driven by choice and a sharing of melodic ideas as they're sharing their personal ideas and their personal experiences to represent an exchange of experiences found in the #MeToo movement. Overall, writing this opera was an incredible experience, and I'm extremely grateful that I got to take part in such a large project through SURF at UWM. If you would like to access the excerpt of my opera or access any of the resources that I used in this video, you may do so by following the link on the screen. And thank you so much for watching.
are